Good evening, everybody. It's 7:01, so we might get started on this special council meeting. Firstly, I'd like to read out the statement of acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationships with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. My name is Nathan Shanks. I'm the current acting mayor, and welcome councillors, staff and members of the gallery. I'm just going to roll through. We have attendance record. At the moment we've got Councillor Hennessy on leave and Councillor Hughes also on leave. So we have no non-attendance. Now we're just going to work through into our deputations. We had a few deputations that we've allowed for tonight. So that's, Nadine and Jackie, that's it, thank you for that. Adrian Shackley and Mr. Ian Tooley as well. So look, Nadine, and Jackie, do you want to jump up to the microphone there and present to the item? Just as a quick reminder to all participants, it's a 5-minute window that we try to stick to. But yeah, thank you very much for coming up.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
We've just got further paperwork to add, or signatures to add to our petition that that Ian Tooley presented to you last council meeting on behalf of us, because we were quite sick. There's a lot of germs floating around in that town of ours. So I don't know what we're supposed to say apart from, like, we did this in a short amount of time with a cardboard cutout sign saying pretty much...
If you don't want to have 6% rate rise, please sign the petition.
We had people from other councils wanting to sign, but they couldn't, obviously. We had people wanting us to go into other councils and get a petition going for them too, which obviously we weren't prepared to do because it's not our council. However, the reason we started this petition is because we cannot afford constant rate rises. Everyone's having to make budget cuts to their family home budgets, and the lowest of paid workers are not getting the price rises in their wages that everybody else is getting. Everyone is getting taxed heavily on everything, paying heavily for everything. Food. So if we, the laymen, can cut back, I'm sure, and make our children go without, or our grandchildren go without, or whatever, I'm sure as councillors you can nut it together and make some cutbacks somewhere, so this does not have to go up by 6% and not revisited every year to go up by 6% just to recoup whatever the previous council did. We are not responsible for what the council is doing. We pay your wages for you to please do the right by us, and it's clearly not happening. It's time you pulled in your own belts and looked at what you're doing and help us to find pride in yous again, to have respect for yous and want to smile at yous in the street instead of looking at you and going, oh God, there's another one that's bloody taking money out of my pocket yet again.
We don't have the money in the pocket.
No one does.
We're cutting down the amount of food we get, what we do. We don't do entertainment. There are young people that have scrimped and scraped to get housing, and they've bought a lovely home that they wanted in Gawler, or they've built it, and now they're going to be lumbered with huge rate rises with that, as well as
mortgage,
food, children going to school, education, everything. It's pretty hard to sort of, I don't know. I just sit there and see these people are probably going to end up selling their houses up. You know, we're going to, more and more people are going to have no house. Look at the elderly. All their money has to go to medications, hospitals, all this stuff, getting help in to shower them and everything else. And then they've got this on top of it when they're not clearly going to be getting a wage. If you put this to 6%, I don't see a point of it. I don't see you ever going to drop it below 6% once you've got that 6%. Things just always keep going, up and up. CPI isn't even 3%, and you're wanting double that, and workers and that haven't been paid. Like, they don't get the 6%.
Look, I'm self-funded. I have no income. I have nothing. We've retired, we paid off a house, and that's it. But we're just living on the bones of our bums now. We have no more money coming in until I hit 67 or go get another job, which I don't want to go back to nursing because it's actually soul-crushed me. And I've got PTSD from it, and it's just beyond a joke. There's so many ungrateful people out there, and we come across as ungrateful because you're popping up the rates and everything, but we're not. We just can't afford it. It's just we can't afford yet another price hike. The government's just announced we're going to put electricity rates up. Something else is going up. Food, petrol.
Emergency service levies
yeah,
up.
emergency service levies going up. Everything's up, and nothing's coming down. There's no break for us. Their mental health is going skyrocketing. People are probably going to start topping themselves. I mean, it's just, when's it going to end? When is it going to end?
You as a council have a conscience that could stop it and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't put it to 6%. Maybe we should listen to the petitions that we've got. And that was, we only did a couple of hours. We got really sick, so we couldn't do days and days. But
We've got another 100 here.
another 100.
To hand
That's
in.
what, 270? And that was a couple of hours.
It's probably
couple
8
of
hours
days.
total.
Yeah.
8 hours total. In the rain, in the cold, people sneezing
And
at
this
us.
is only ratepayers. We made sure it was
Just
only
council rate payers.
of
We
Gawler.
had retirement village people wanting to sign. We had all sorts of people wanting to sign for their mothers and fathers.
But
And
they couldn't because they're on.
we just couldn't do
Right,
it
pro
because it's
ratas.
not legal. This is legally the people from Gawler
For a couple
saying
of
we can't
hours.
afford it. Where do I give this to?
To this, yep.
All right, you can say this.
Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, we'll take this and we'll be tabling this as part of the submission process as well as we work through our process to get to the end of that budget cycle. And absolutely, we're looking to see what we can do with the final headline rate figure as well. That won't necessarily be resolved tonight. That'll run through the process and be struck at that June meeting. But thank you for providing the feedback and spending the time by garnishing those signatures as well. They will help inform some decision making. Thank you.
Yeah, every single signature was someone saying, I can't do it. Just remember that. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Mr. Adrian Shackley.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, councillors, staff. I just came along tonight to talk a little bit about the stone curb work that Gawler Environment and Heritage Association's been doing, following the decision of the council a while ago to get into a policy of some sort. And we've provided some information already, which was following a request to do something as quickly as we could on 12th Street particularly. So that's been provided. I have to say it's been a fairly steep learning curve for myself doing the research on this. So it's been very interesting. And one of the particular things that's been interesting is the history of Gawler Council mainly using bluestone from the local quarries, and the Gawler South Council, which is where 12th Street is, using a fair bit of slate. Now, I don't have all the evidence, but you would have seen at least a fairly significant proportion of what they were buying was slate from Intero, so good luck with that. But the 12th Street is mostly at least slate, so it's different, doesn't match very well with the much rougher bluestone that's in the rest of Gawler. So that's something seriously to think through. So there does appear to be good supply of bluestone curbs available, particularly the stuff from Wistow that looked like a bargain. So, finding stone that's suitable for the old bluestone curbs looks as, apart from what council might already have stashed away or what might have their eye on, looks as though that's okay, but there certainly needs more investigation about slate. In terms of the 12th Street itself, council did quite a bit of work there about 20 years ago. Spoken to Jim Callanan from LR&M, and the council employed them to do some restoration work on somewhere over 100 metres of the stone curb there, and including on the corner with 17th Street, which was interesting. And also Wayne Lay, who lives in 12th Street, who's worked as a sort of contract worker doing curbs and stone work and things like that with curbs. So that's been very helpful as well, catching up with all that information. So we've got a problem. The stone curbing in 12th Street is probably the best in Gawler. So it makes it tough. The stone that we looked at, there's a bit at the back of the shops just near Murray Road, Adelaide Road there, that's a bit rough. But the rest of it up in the residential, sort of more residential area, like somewhere between 87, 88% of that is basically you just leave it there. It's in excellent condition. It doesn't need to be changed at all. So the amount of actual stone that needs to be found is quite low, because even some of the stuff that's not in good shape can probably be reused in various ways, but you can't tell that very well till it's out of the ground. I've been talking to the CEO. I think I'm quite keen to do a bit more research on just the logistics of how to manage a street like 12th Street in terms of, can you do the curbing prior to other work? Can you, do it alongside the other work? How do you do it so that you've got time, you're not in a rush to do it in a hell of a hurry, which can cause issues as well. So the other thing is, in terms of drainage in the street, apart from the spoon drain at 8th Street, the problems with drainage is pretty clearly tree roots. I mean, there's half a dozen places where tree roots have lifted the whole pavement, including sometimes the curb, and that's where water builds up and won't flow properly down the things. So that's an issue for those trees, because they're very close to the curbs, and quite a few of them are regulated trees. So I'm not sure where that... You got an even worse problem if you put concrete curbs in there, because it just lifts them and cracks them. Whereas with the stone curbs, it'll lift one up, but that just comes up. So that's probably the most of what I wanted to run through. I had an excellent quote somewhere from the South Gawler Council. What did I do with it?
We're just running up to that 5 minutes there.
So, yeah, in 1923, there was a meeting of South Gawler residents talking about whether they wanted to join in with Gawler Council. There was quite a debate about a range of things, as you might imagine. And one of the things that came up was a statement from someone, that quite a pride statement about, we've got really good footpaths and we've got excellent curbs across the whole council area. It really was a feature of the council at that time. We need to better document. So we've started, but we really haven't got all the information together yet, so that should be coming.
Thank you.
And happy to take questions later and follow up,
no
by
worries.
email or whatever.
Perfect. Councillor Koshy, a comment? Did you want to... I'm just conscious of trying to get into the business. Did you have a question for Mr. Shackley, or... Yeah.
Mr. Shackley, when I was working for the Melbourne City Council many years ago as an arborist, one of the projects they were working on was roots lifting up paths and footpaths, and what they worked out was it was actually the displacement of soil around from the root, the root pressure lifting the soil, causing the breakage. Have you actually seen any of that research?
Not specifically. I mean, yeah, you can see it. You just have a look at that street. I mean, you can see a whole range of places where the root sometimes is visible, mostly it's not, but you can clearly see, where the pavement asphalt has lifted and blocked the drainage along the water table. Yeah, I'm happy to follow up on that as well. I found my quote. Here it is. In Gawler South, they were a walking public, and nowhere did they possess better footpaths, well curbed all through the district council. How good's that?
Thank you for that, Adrian. Actually, Councillor Koch, are you able to take this conversation offline with Mr. Adrian
Yeah, I
Shackley?
was just going to say that Dr. Peter Yao was the one doing the research.
Thank you for that. It sounds like you guys have got some good conversations to come. Mr. Ian Tooley. Thank you.
My stopwatch showed that as 7 minutes, but anyway. Just very quickly on the curbing, I wasn't going to speak on the curbing, but I was here at the meeting when you had your staff talk about the curbing. You said $150 per metre for concrete. DIT recommends concrete. Your own cost for bluestone was $580 per metre. Escosa tells you you're financially on your knees, how you could even consider bluestone curbing on 12th Street. You don't even have it on Julian Terrace. I'll leave that. I spoke at length at a previous meeting, so I don't intend to speak. I actually didn't think I was going to speak tonight because I put in a request and I didn't hear back, so I only found out tonight that I can speak. The officer's report that you've got tonight says there were 31 submissions. I counted 32. And I discovered today when a resident emailed me and said, Ian, the CEO has just told me he forgot to put my submission in. And I believe, Mr. Cowley, you told that resident there were 4 other submissions that were forgotten. Is that correct, Mr. Cowley?
Through Mr. Mayor, sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor, certainly, and it was an administrative error, and I was quite honest with that gentleman, that yes, there was 4, and I'm pleased to report those 4 have been provided to our elected members and will be included in the minutes to ensure they are captured. Thank you.
And have they had enough time to read them, Mr. Cowley, do you think?
In terms of this evening, I can't speak for the elected members, but after the official meeting this evening, we'll go into a briefing session, at which point I will appraise the councillors of the contents of those submissions.
Thank you. So that makes 36 submissions. One of the submissions was to waive burial fees, Councillor White, which was a great submission. There were 3 submissions asking for additional funding, playground, Anglican church roof, Dad's group. There were 2 submissions supporting the budget. I calculate there were 30 submissions strongly opposed to the budget, and it's 6% rate hike. By my calculation, that is 84% of the 36 submissions were opposed to the budget. We had 163, you've just had another 100, I think that makes it 263, maybe 270 people signing a petition saying they reject the budget, and it's 6%. So there's those stats for you. I've done this stat for you. Councillor Koch, and I thank him for doing this, he pointed out in one of his letters to the editor that this is not just 6% for 2025, this is 6% recommended in the long-term financial plan for the next 10 years. So I've done the maths for you. It's a compounding effect. So if I just take a standard rate of 2,500, and there are many that are higher and lower than that, 2,500, 6% is 150. So after the first year, that becomes 2,650 is your rates. Then 6% on that, 2,650, adds another 159, becomes 2,809. By the year 2029, 5 years in, those 2,500 rates are now at 3,348. That's a 35% increase. If you keep compounding until you get to the 10th year, 2034, the rates now are not any longer 2,500, they're now 4,500, and that is an 80% increase in the rates. Now, an AMBIC claim in a budget, you've been told, members, that this budget can't be cut. The reality is every department puts in an AMBIC claim knowing they'll never get it all. So the IT department says we want every computer. They know they'll only get 50% changed. This happens to me in the high school when I do a high school budget. So it is true that when you got the budget, there had been cuts. And they will tell you with this budget, it can't be cut. But I remind you again, in 2023, when you were told the budget was lean and you could not cut it, you cut 1,580,000 from that budget. If me running a high school decided in the best interests of the kids, I would just keep employing staff. And I said, you know what, I can only pay for this by putting a 6% increase in my school fees in a government school, I would have had them at the door and the department would have hoiked me and said, Ian, you should never have employed those extra staff. You had no right to do that with your global budget and then expect the parents to pay for it. You've got to live within your means. And let me just finish with this one example. And I'm going to go back to the Pioneer Park Wall. If you had decided to say, it is a worthy project, but we're just not in a financial situation, and you'd said this, we will demolish that wall and we will store those stones at the previous waste transfer depot until we're flushed with money, and in the meantime, we'll live with a 45-degree grassed rampart like you have on the northern side of the entrance. That's $2 million you could save. And by the calculation of your own costings, this year you would not need to increase rates by 6%. You could have reduced the rates by 2% by taking that one item of $2 million out. How you ever thought, with a SCOSA breathing down your neck and with your financial situation, that in this situation you could afford the luxury of $2 million on a Pioneer Park Wall and now consider bluestone curbing on 12th Street, and you put that project at risk now, you're at risk of losing $900,000 from DIT because you've stopped that project, because this lobby group came to you. This just boggles our mind as the ratepayers sitting out there watching how you operate. It's as if you are detached from the reality of living within your means. So we're going to sit here tonight and watch any discussion that you have, but on the 23rd, I'm really hoping we fill the gallery, because that's the night when we're going to watch how you decide what you do with the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for that. Did you have any comments at all, or we're just going to move on? Yep. Yeah, no worries at all. All right, well, we're just going to move through the agenda now. Members, we have item 4, decision reports. We have, yes, proposed date change for the June Ordinary Council meeting due to the clash with Canberra there. So just putting that to the members, if anyone would like to move that recommendation, I'm in your hands. You're happy to move that way. Councillor Davies, did you want to talk to it at all?
This is just a bit of common sense. We approved the Deputy Mayor and CEO to represent us in Canberra, but unfortunately it conflicts with our June meeting where we decide the budget and all sorts of other things. And so if we can move it by a day and have, our Deputy Mayor and CEO there, I think it makes sense.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Do I have a seconder? You're happy to second there, Jim? Any discussion from you, Jim? Any further discussion on the item? There being none, Councillor Davies, you're happy for me to close? I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Moving forward, we've got item 4.2, the officer's recommendation. Would you like to move that way, Councillor Davies? Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, so firstly, I'd just like to start by thanking everyone for their feedback. That is what this motion is about. I know the process is a little confusing at budget time, but to be clear, this motion doesn't have a decision on the budget or the rates. It is receiving the public submissions, thanking the people who participated, and noting that any changes based on feedback, etc., will be presented at our council meeting. So, and look, I agree with much of the feedback from the community. I also don't plan to vote for a budget with a 6% rate rise. The reason I'm happy with this process at the moment is we as councillors have already told this to the CEO and he's already been working on it. And he's shared with us some fundamental long-term savings he's been working through, like reviewing every staff position as it becomes vacant to see whether it's still required, which, as I understand, has been in process, and I think we'll get a briefing afterwards on that. If he were to come back to us at the ordinary meeting with a 6% rate rise, I think we would vote the budget down and say, come back with a better one, because we told the CEO, you know, not 6%, but at this stage our new CEO has given us no reason to distrust him. So I think we should let him work through the process. I think that is a more efficient process than just trying to nitpick through the budget at this stage as councillors. I think previously councillors have tried to do that, and I don't think it's been very efficient. I think it's more been out of frustration. I think if there's a budget item for $100,000 for new infrastructure, for example, councillors don't have any insight into how much of that budget is contingency planning, how much of it is using higher end materials when a lower end materials would do, etc. So if I just make a motion saying take $20,000 off that project, I don't know if we're making a good investment or if we're greenlighting a shoddy product that will require further work down the line. So I think in a functioning organisation, we should be able to just tell the CEO that we want to cut the costs, and then if there are savings to be had, they'll be made in the appropriate places. And yeah, look, I think the way that it was done before, with council trying to, you know, micromanage the staff, I think was more just an indicator of a gap in trust at the time. And we've been working to bridge those gaps, and so I want to extend the trust to our new CEO, who we hired specifically for his background in finance, to present us with a budget we can take to the community. So that's all I wanted to say for now, and I hope you'll support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Looking for a seconder. You had a question, Councillor Solomon? I might just ask for a seconder beforehand. Have we got a seconder at this time? You're happy to second? Would you like to speak to it? And then I'll take your question, Councillor Solomon.
Thank you. Just pretty much echoing what Councillor Davies is saying there as well. And by all means, I don't want to have a 6% rise, so we need to come back and see what happens. You know, we all got stuff to do. I do look very much down the line of what our future, our kids and our grandkids are going to be, and making sure that we're making informed decisions, so we're not just kicking the can down the road. But same thing again, I made some decisions back in the last budget to cut, which, you know, may be right, may be wrong sort of thing. And that was, in my own view, from what I came into, was that trust thing and the transparency of the current, of that executive management team and CEO and that sort of stuff, which I didn't feel that they were doing what they needed to be doing. So also, with Chris on board as well, and the way the staff has been conducting themselves, I've got a lot more confidence in what they're trying to do, and definitely hope we come back below 6. So,
Thank you, Councillor Lorna. Did you have a question there, Councillor Solomon?
Just, it was mentioned by Councillor Davies there, but I was wondering whether we could defer to the CEO just to explain a little bit about what the administration is doing to cut spending other than collecting higher rates, so savings other than through rate revenue.
No worries at all. I'll take that question. And also, I'll tack a little bit on if I can. Can you also just touch on how capital projects are funded through borrowings rather than rate revenue, and rate revenue helps to pay back borrowings?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thanks for the question. Thank you for the commentary, Councillor Davies. I I think it's fair to say I didn't need council to tell me to relook at this budget. I was a firm believer of taking close attention to the community feedback that we get, and the overarching message was that cost of living pressures were impacting on our community, and we needed to have regard for that. So with that in mind, I just want to share some of the things that I've been looking at. I know we're going to go into a session after this meeting, but I just thought broadly, and for the benefit of our audience and anyone listening online, just be beneficial for them to understand that I firmly believe the administration and the councils are working together on this challenge. So one of the first things I had a look at was our staffing levels. And I actually went back over the last 8 or so years to see what the trends had been, and they actually stayed fairly static. But I have heard the community about this concept of, well, do we need to increase our staffing levels? And I'm going to put a proposal to council whereby we keep the staff at the current levels. As an indicator, I had recommended to council that we put 3 new staff on. That was the stormwater engineer, the economic development officer, and an arborist. I'm pleased to say I've worked with Wendy and her team, and I'm going to recommend that we don't put the arborist on. I'm also going to recommend that to effectively fund the stormwater engineer and the economic development role, that I don't fill 2 current vacancies that I've got, and those, and not just not fill them, but actually remove them from the structure, so that we have a net effect of 0. Because there are very pertinent reasons why I think we should employ those other 2 roles. The other thing we looked at quite carefully was our operating costs. Were there ways where we could look at efficiencies? Now, to be fair, I've been looking at efficiencies since I started. And if I'm honest, I was looking to bring some of them on once we'd adopt this budget. But on reflection, I think we're able to bring some of those on now and have them encapsulated in this budget. And just as an indicator, one of the things that, and it seems small in the scheme of things, but I want to share it just to demonstrate the thinking that's going on. So Wendy came to me with a concept that we empty our street bins on a Saturday morning. And bear in mind, they were emptied on the Friday before the Saturday. And we reviewed the action and saying, do they need to be emptied on a Saturday morning? We incur lots of penalty rates. So we've got to go through a bit of a process with the team, but we're looking to stop doing that. And that will realise $30,000 a year. It's not a large sum of money, but if you add that up with another 3 or 4 initiatives that we can find across the organisation, it starts to make an impact. I'm going to share some capital purchases that I think we can not make this coming year. And by doing so, we will make fairly considerable savings on our interest bill. So I'm going to talk to council about potentially a $75,000 savings on our interest bill by deferring some CapEx. So as an example, by not putting on the arborist, we no longer require the trucks, the chippers, the water cart, and combined, that's $455,000 of capital expenditure. Now, that would have been borrowings. So it's not direct off of our rates burden, but it's less borrowings that I'm recommending council take out. And that translates, 1, less borrowings, which is a great outcome, but 2, it drops our interest bill down. The other thing we did was look at the carry forward projects that we were recommending to council that we hadn't completed this year, but we wanted to carry them forward into this coming financial year. And again, we've had a hard look at that in the light of the community saying, we're pulling our belts in, can council pull its belt in? There's $834,000 worth of projects, which Wendy has gone through with her team again, and we feel that we can, at the bare minimum, push them out to latter years, they don't need to be done this coming financial year. That again translates to $834,000 of less borrowings. Now you can see a theme here that we're quickly getting up to $1.5 million less borrowings. Put a 5% interest rate on that, and those savings start to become reasonably substantial. Now, I'm in the invidious position of hearing some very good arguments about bluestone guttering and the alternative. I will be making some recommendations to council about the bluestone guttering on 12th particularly. And being completely honest and open and transparent, my view is that we shouldn't do the bluestone. It's not because I don't like heritage and I don't like bluestone, but at this point in our future, I think we need to focus on our financial sustainability. I'm not making that decision for council, I'm just sharing with you what my recommendation is going to be. Talking about the rate rise itself, now it was at 6%. The community have clearly said that's too high. Now that 6% rate rise translated through, on average, to an extra $134 per annum for the ratepayer in question. I'm not going to say publicly and commit to any number, that's council's decision, and we'll have that conversation and ultimately it will come public at our next ordinary council meeting. But I do feel that it's in our power to come to the community with a 4 in front. I don't want to say whether it's a high or a low 4, but to go any lower than that, I think would impinge on our ability to pay down debt in a fairly timely fashion in the future. I think we can have a balanced position here where we listen to the community, but also take care of our long-term financial sustainability. What these measures would do for us as well is also, when we reflect on the long-term financial plan, and the concern we heard from the community was that the next 5 years in particular, there's a 6% number being quoted. If we can lock in these savings and hold the line and not add to them in latter years, that's the trick here. We've got to hold on to these efficiencies that we've gained. Those next 5 years will be below 6%. Can't quote the number, we need to do the hard data. But the next 5 years, they won't have a 6 in front. They will have lower numbers, which I think is what our community is telling us they would like. I do want to talk about the Pioneer Wall just quickly. It was shared with us that if we hadn't done the wall, that would have, I'll just loose the numbers, be effective a 6% savings. That's not quite the case because we were going to borrow the funds for the wall. If we had funded that from operating, absolutely, but we didn't budget it that way. So if we had chosen not to do that project, effectively we would have borrowed $2 million less. Now you would make some savings, and year on year you would make the interest savings, which still amounts to $90,000 or $100,000, which is still a figure, but you wouldn't have saved 6%-ish of rates in the 1 year. Just want to be clear about that was funded from borrowings, so it wasn't direct operational savings. I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but I hope that's just given a bit of an overview of where certainly my head's at and on the conversation I'd like to have with the council going forward.
Thank you, CEO. Did you have a question, Councillor Koch?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions.
Yep.
The first one is, if we drop below the 6%, will we have to redo a long-term financial plan? Because it's all predicated on doing, the supposed backlog of asset renewal and paying that and taking the debt up to 35 to 37 million and then paying 21 million down in 5 years and having no capital investment. For example, footy ovals at Northern Park and all new roads and everything else.
Yep.
So will we have to rescind the long-term financial plan?
So, sorry, I'll just have a crack and then get your assistance in this one. Councillor Koch, the answer is the long-term financial plan needs to be reviewed every budget cycle. We need to adjust. It can't just be a set and forget. Unfortunately, we've seen a couple of long-term financial plans in the past that have tried to forecast too far ahead without the appropriate review, and some of the service reviews and the constant review over and over and over and over again. Once we're finished, we need to start again. We need to make sure that those efficiencies, if we're going to embed in. And as you know, the long-term financial plan is a discussion that parallels each budget and where we're trying to get as an overarching goal. But there is no rescind of a long-term financial plan. It's an evolving document that we need to keep focus on and evolve each budget cycle with our overs and unders to then help inform the following year. That's like any business strategy.
Well, I mean, the concern I have is that this budget locks in, our debt will go to 27 million.
But that's not, yeah, sorry.
And then, but then this is the budget we send off to the Local Government Financial Authority, so we could actually lift our debt ceiling from 22 to 37. So I would have thought we'd have to redo our long-term financial plan, because we've actually said to the financial, the LGAFA, that this is what we're going to do.
Mr. CEO?
Yeah. So, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. And you are correct, Mr Deputy Mayor. Essentially, we do redo the long-term financial plan every year. The piece you're concerned about, I think it's important that we talk about that, actually. The only way this works is if the savings that we agree on to get us below 6% are locked in, and they are locked in and enshrined for the next umpteen years. So as an example, if we can, I'll just use 1% of rates as an example. If we were to save $300,000, it's 1% of rates, that $300,000 must not pop its head back up and come back into the operating cost of this organisation. If I'm going to save that money, we've got to keep that saving. That's the only way this can work. And that's how our long-term financial plan continues to stack up.
Thank you. Councillor Koch, you got a question? Councillor Davies?
Yeah, so just around, you were talking about the difference between the funding on borrowings and that sort of thing, but it might be difficult to wrap your head around if you're not looking at a council budget regularly. So just, I guess, the difference between, because, so my understanding being that, like, when you cut the staff positions, for example, you're not cutting, say, 100,000 from this budget, you're cutting 100,000 permanently from every budget going into the future, because that's just a permanent cost that's not there, and that's why you can reduce that long-term plan version, as opposed to a borrowing, which is just a one-time cost. Maybe an explanation on that.
Yeah, certainly, through Mr Deputy Mayor. Yep. When we fund the budget, it's funded one of two ways. One, from the rates, or the second way is from borrowings. Now, traditionally, we use borrowings when we're paying for things that, in essence, last longer than a year. So if it's the stone walls, we want that to last 100 years. We borrow funds for that, and we'll pay that off, principal and interest, a little bit every year for the next 15 years, say. The rates that we raise, we use them to fund, if you like, the things that happen in that 12-month period, and we're going to expend. So wages is a classic. Council should never borrow money to fund wages. That's the principle we should adhere to. Does that clarify a little bit? Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, again, just to touch on your point, if you don't make the operational saving and then embed it, you're just kicking the can down the road. So that's where when we speak about $300,000 popping back up again, it's only because you've delayed a project, and it's not a embedded saving, it's a superficial one that pops back up later on because we haven't addressed the issue, the problem still stands. And that's that service review model that's been worked through. Did I have any other questions? Councillor Vallelonga, you had a question.
This is a business type question. I was reading in the paper the other day, I think it might have been Mount Barker, $44 million in the red, in debt. Now, that's a lot of money. but they got double we're almost up there in the same borrowings. But they're a double the size council too. We never ever talk about increasing, not the rates, but increasing how we get more revenue. And the only way we get revenue is by rates. So how do we increase that?
Yeah, I'm happy to go to the CEO.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. You're quite right, Councillor Valonga. Rates is our primary revenue tool. But I'd actually, and I'm planning on having a detailed conversation because it's not quite right to share the details with the public just yet. But I am looking to talk to Council about the commercial revenue opportunities that exist to us around using some of our current council assets. And I am also going to talk to Council. Now, this can be controversial, and it all needs to be considered very carefully and what's best for our community. But it might be that Council says we have certain assets which we no longer need, and we might sell them. Now, you should never sell those to fund operating. I'd advocate that if we do that, and again, there's a lot of work to be had before we go forward with that, I would encourage Council to use that to retire debt. And what that does, then takes the pressure off of our rate revenue, and we can utilise it for different things. So, whilst the other revenue streams probably will never near the magnitude of our rates, I'm a firm believer that we have got some other opportunities. Yep. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Jim? You happy with that? Yep. No worries. Do I have any other questions or any other speakers to this motion? Councillor Wyatt?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Excuse me. Look, I first of all just really want to thank the community for getting involved with the budget process. In particular, Nadine and Jackie. I want to really thank you guys for getting out there and in amongst the community. And, you know, in the world we live in today, whether it's local government or big federal governments across the ocean, civil engagement in government is on the decline, and it's really, really depressing. So to see it so actively involved in our community, and part of the reason why I think Gawler is a wonderful place to live, is huge. So I take my hat off to both of you, and also thank the hundreds of people that signed the petition as well. So thank you, and I truly mean it when you can see it right now. The voices are heard and is discussed, and even if the decision isn't always exactly the outcome of what we want, it is discussed and your voices are heard, so thank you. Deputy Mayor, times are tough in our community at the moment, and as we approach the final stages of approving the 25-26 budget, I do think it is crucial that we keep the rate rise to an absolute minimum. Again, I want to thank everyone who provided their feedback on a range of issues, but the largest and most consistent of which was to ensure that that 6% rate revenue increase comes down. I agree with this, and I'll continue working with my fellow elected members and the council administration to find savings where we can in order to bring down the rate revenue required. But I do want it to be important to note that if we reduce the size of our revenue too much, we won't be able to invest in our asset renewal and maintain the services that the community expects from us. And sadly, in the world we live in today, things like concrete for footpaths, asphalt for roads aren't getting any cheaper. I hear you guys, and I hear all the people that are saying we need to keep our rates down, and I agree with you completely. I wish we didn't have to have a rate increase. In fact, I wish we didn't have to pay council rates whatsoever. But in the same breath, of my other ear, I've got thousands of people that play footy and netball every weekend that are just crying out for new facilities. They're using the asbestos-filled change rooms, and they're seeing, when they go play away in Light Council or the Barossa, the amazing facilities that they have. There's residents that have got flooding driveways because the stormwater along their street is been completely neglected. Now, the reason why we are behind is not relevant right now, but that is, you know, something that all of us signed up when we put our hands up to be elected. The tough decisions have to be made, and it is about finding that balance. It is about saying, yep, we agree with you. We need to keep these rates down to as little as possible. But just sadly, the world we live in is it can't be zero and it can't be free because, you know, as hard as it is, those footy club rooms are never going to get upgraded. Those stormwaters are never going to be fixed. Like, it is about finding that right balance. You know, as a 22-year-old that's been elected to this council to represent our community, but also I think young people, you know, I work full-time. I also get paid for being on council. I'm very fortunate in that sense. But I still can't afford a house. I still find it difficult to buy eggs and milk, and like everyone else does. And I know that I am much more privileged than a lot of members of our community. And I think about that every time I walk into this chamber. And I'm actually a little bit scared because I go, goodness me, when my grandparents were my age, they could afford a house with the normal wage. I'm on that and maybe more, and I can't. How am I going to live, let alone my kids? And that is actually a scary thought. But in the same breath, I also go that I have a responsibility to look after this council as an organisation, and also, yeah, make some of the hard calls and fulfil some of the promises that I made to some of those people when I said, yep, we're going to get these club rooms up and running again. We're going to make sure that your roads are maintained, that you can have a safe driveway. You know, all these things that might seem small, but to those people is really important too. And I guess I'm using the tools I have to try and find that perfect balance. So again, I really want to thank you both in particular, but the whole community for submitting their feedback. And I guess just rest assured that at least I hear, and I can't speak on behalf of all elected members, but I feel like there's a pretty good consensus that we are finding the best we can, the right balance, while also, you know, sometimes making the decisions that aren't going to make us the most popular people in the community, and that's okay. But I just want to say from my point of view, I'm doing the absolute best I can with the tools and resources that we've got at our disposal to keep that rate rise down to an absolute minimum without affecting our long-term future and ensuring that Gawler and its assets and infrastructure and facilities matches the vibrant and amazing community that we are. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Koch?
I'd like to thank everyone that put submissions in. This is my, 13th or 14th budget, and this is the most number of submissions I've ever had, ever seen. And it's no surprise that people are, not very happy, very unhappy about the 6% rate rise. In this budget that starts the long-term financial plan that will go for 10 years, and the escalating cost of their rates over that 10 years, I just think people have realised it's just not sustainable for their budgets, and we need to do something about it. I am concerned about this view that we've got this backlog of asset renewal. We've always got assets to be renewed. The footpath renewal is a list which is 30 years long. That's the reality. All road, everything needs to be done. I've had a number of people come to me and say, oh, the council did a great job on my road. I don't know why they did it, because there was nothing wrong with it. So I'm not an engineer, and there's probably some reason, but these people were not saying to anybody that they needed their road done. It was incredible. I'm also concerned about the long-term debt, the fact that we're going to go really high, our debt's going to go really unsustainable, and then all of a sudden we're going to pay back the 21 million. I've said this over and over again, it boggles me that we could actually think that was actually achievable. And also, in the long-term financial plan, I know we're going to review it and everything else, but nowhere in that first 10 years is there any money for new capital expenses like a new oval at the Northern Parklands, or any road interventions to do with Concordia, which is mentioned in our document there. So for me, I think the long-term financial plan has always been an issue, and I think it was unrealistic. And unfortunately, we voted for it, and it actually set in train what we see tonight and what we're going to see in a fortnight, because staff have used that long-term financial plan and based the budget on it. And I think that long-term financial plan is flawed. So I'm heartened a little bit to know that we're going to be doing something with it, but I think it needs to be reviewed because it sets in train some pretty ordinary, unfinancially sustainable outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, did you have a comment that you would like to make? I'm just conscious of not getting in a back and forth debate.
Just a quick comment, and I hear your concerns, Councillor Koch, but I think there's a couple of key points we need to reflect on. The first is, if we reflect on what our long-term financial plan had projected this budget to be, and it was projected to be a 6% rate rise with a deficit budget, i.e. we were going to borrow more money to operate. What together we have managed to achieve is a proposal where I think we can deliver a budget for less than 6% and deliver a surplus of around $300,000. Now, what that does do, because you can't think about paying back debt until you have a surplus. And so this is the very first step in a long journey. It's a long journey, and I'm hearing you, there's lots of concerns along the way, but this is, I think, a very positive step in that journey. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, for those additional comments. Did I have any other further discussion? Councillor Solomon?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll just share some thoughts from tonight, and of course I don't want to overdo it, but like everyone else, I do want to thank everyone who has engaged with this process. It's certainly one of the highest turnouts that I've seen with engagement with a budget process to date, and I think that's quite healthy. It's very obvious, as I think it's been obvious for a couple of years now, that residents are unhappy with, and ratepayers are unhappy with the direction that our rates have been heading. In the past, I've talked about at length the reason why I think that is and how we got to this situation. And I've done that because I think it's important to be honest about how we got here in order to ensure that we don't make those same mistakes again. But I'm not going to reinterrogate that tonight. What I would say is that certainly I think that there's been a serious change of direction. No one likes where we're at, but there has been a change of direction. I think what the CEO outlined is for the first time something that I can begin to have confidence in. There was some commentary there as well on what happened with the budget in 23 and the budget in 24 as well. At the time, I'll speak for myself and say that I voted the way that I did because the exponential growth in costs, operational costs, which we saw, I thought were unsustainable. Now, we as a council have a very blunt mechanism to deal with that. We control two things, we control the budget and we employ the CEO. Now, that was a very blunt mechanism we used, but it was putting a handbrake on that growth where we said we were not going to support that kind of spending, which in my view was reckless at the time. Well, not even reckless, but directionless. It had no direction and no bearing behind it. I think what we have now is a concerted effort to make savings, and I want to be clear that the expectation, certainly that I have, is that over that long-term financial plan, we do see that come down, and it's not going to be 6% every year. But that means hard decisions. When we started talking about asset management, which sounds boring, but is really, really quite important, understanding what we own, how much it costs us to own that, to repair it, to maintain it, I had said at the time, we need to have the courage when this comes out, when this boogeyman that we don't currently know how much this thing costs, when it comes out, we need to have the courage to stand by that and say, we are going to make sure we get on top of this, because that is the kind of thing that damages budgets over the long term. And where we sit now, I still see some hesitancy to do that and the courage to do that. So all I would say is that when we get to making the hard decisions about what we have to cut, because we likely will have to cut services, we will have to look at the way that we do things over the next few years, that the members of this chamber do have the courage to do that. And so I think there's three things that I would hope that we come out of this budget with. And it is that, one, that we've taken stock of where we are. Two, that we take responsibility for where we are at the current time. And three, is we take control of this thing. I'll just quickly mention, with hopefully not running out of time. But I'll just quickly mention, when I got elected to council, I talked about doing the small things right, the small things done right. To me, that's things people were talking to me. I don't understand why we repair this road 5 times and it would just be cheaper to renew it. Now, my understanding of some of the way that we're approaching assets now, and that's probably an oversimplification, but my understanding of the way that we're looking at assets now is that that's the kind of investment we're making. We're renewing it now, and we're using our debt in order to do that, to save over the long term. That being said, it's the way we were budgeting in the past, it's never acceptable to, as was mentioned, to pay staff wages out of by borrowing, and that's a practice that needed to come, now brought to an end. And so I'm really looking forward to what comes back to the chamber. I think the feedback is clear. Not only this year is 6% too high, but 6% is too high over the future. But I think as elected members, we need to take responsibility and we need to be serious about getting that down. And now that we've seen the cost of this budget, we need to have the courage, we need to have more courage than we've had this year to go into the next one and look at where we go from here so that we can honour what has been brought to us by ratepayers, which is that we are not budgeting sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sonneman. Was there any other further discussion? There be none. Councillor Davies, you want to close the debate?
Sure. So thanks to everyone for all the discussion. I think in terms of the long-term financial plan, we won't be voting on that in the budget, but of course the budget always informs the long-term financial plan. I think the key thing to consider is when the CEO says that he's saved a couple of staff positions after reviewing them, that's from people leaving and discussing whether to keep the position, and that's not, we don't have 100% turnover of staff every year. If we did, I would be extremely concerned. You know, it might be 10% or whatever, but that means that every year positions are going to come up and there's going to be a decision and a review, do we still need this position? And if that too eventually becomes a 10 or something like that, that means every year, say $1 million is cut out of the recurring budget. And so when we talk about long-term financial plan, we've got the changes we can make in the short term, but there's also the changes that there just hasn't been time to make yet, but are clearly in progress. So when we talk about the long-term financial plan, I think just thinking of it as the way we are right now isn't that helpful, because things are deliberately being changed so that the long-term costs come down. And yeah, so just to agree with, I think Councillor White made a point about, you know, we want to lower the rates, but we also have plenty of things that we need to fund. And that is, and I think everyone agrees with that. I think if you look at the budget submissions, there were the budget submissions that were specifically about, we'd like this, this and this, but the budget submissions that asked for the rates to be reduced also had plenty of things that they wanted. I listed down a few of them here that I noted. People who wanted a 6%, the 6% not to be the rate rise, wanted better lighting, more paved footpaths, addressing a lack of car parking in Gawler, more maintenance at the Clonley Dog Park, more work to be done on beautifying our entrances into Gawler, assisting older and younger residents with land foundations and self-builds, fixing our roads, looking after the homeless, creating a food bank for the needy, more funding for the Climate Emergency Action Plan, a new multi-storey car park at the Gawler Central train station, activation of Goose Island, running rodeos and medieval fairs to attract tourism to Gawler, new footpaths and drainage on Calton Road, a bus service to Springwood, and more. And this is from the people who wanted the rates down. So we have to understand we're always going to try and be efficient with our savings, but we do need to spend because the community expects us to deliver a community for them that they can be proud of. And that's part of it too. And so we'll keep making those savings in the areas where we can be efficient so that we can make improvements in the areas that the community would like as well. So that's it for me for now, and I hope you'll all support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. The debate is now closed. I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Being that is our last item, I will now close the meeting at 8:06 and also offer my sincere thanks to everyone that came along tonight, tuned in and also participated in the process today. Thank you. Good night.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, can I just say one thing? This is completely different. I'd just like to say condolences to Susie Skews. I've known them for 30 plus years, and he was a good councillor and a very good police officer.
Thank you for those words, Councillor Ballalonger. I think we can all agree. Thank you.